If your hips feel so stiff, they feel completely locked up, I want to show you my favorite routine to get those hips unlocked. Now for this routine, I have some yoga blocks, I have some weights, and I have access to an elevated surface. I'm just going to use this ottoman here. So join me down on the ground. We're going to start by warming up the hips with some 90-90 transfers. So hands will be behind the back, knees out to the side at about a 45-degree angle. Pull your toes up towards your knees. This will help keep your knees protected. Then drop the knees all the way over to the right side. First, we're going to keep that right knee down on the ground, and you're going to pick up only that left knee. Try and keep that right knee down as long as possible. When you can't keep that right knee down, it can come off the ground. Now keep that right knee back as you're pushing the left one down. When your left knee touches the ground, you can let your right knee follow, so it's all the way down to the ground. Then we'll reverse. Keep your left knee down on the ground, picking up only the right knee. When you can't keep that left knee down, you can come off the ground through this bear sit position, push your right knee down on the ground, and then that left one can follow. Keep your right knee down on the ground, picking up only the left knee. We'll go through this bear sit position, push your left knee down to the ground, and then the right one can follow, and then we'll go back one more time, picking up only that right knee. Go through this bear sit position, push your right knee down to the ground, and the left one follows. Now we're going to stay over here. Grab your yoga block. We'll stay in this 90-90 position. We're just going to open up the hip in external rotation and the piriformis just a little bit more. Take your yoga block, place it underneath your hip. So this front leg is the one we're worried about mostly. You don't have to worry so much about this back leg. You can find a position that's comfortable for you. If you're feeling a lot of cramping in this hip, move your knee forward a little bit. Now, we're going to make sure this front leg is bent at 90 degrees or greater. We're going to square our body up with our right, deep in your right glute. Where you feel that stretch, start pushing your right ankle down into the floor. You'll feel your glutes starting to work. You don't have to push super hard, only 30 to 40% of your strength. So still keep pushing that ankle down into the floor for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now stop pushing and see if you can go just a little bit more. So that's called a PAIL, progressive angular isometric loading. The amount of change after that is only going to be 5 to 10 degrees. So start pushing your right ankle down into the floor again. Feel your right glute working for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop pushing your foot into the floor. See if you can pull yourself just a little bit lower, 5 to 10 degrees. And pause in this new position. And we do one more. Push your right ankle down into the floor again for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop pushing. See if we can get a little bit more stretch. It's probably only going to be about 5 degrees. We're just going to pause in this position. Take a few nice deep breaths. Now we've gained access to a slightly greater range of motion. I'm going to remove that yoga block, and then we do a 90-90 transfer to the other side. Keep your right knee down on the ground. Hinge open only that left knee. We're going to go through this bear sit again. Push your left knee down to the ground, and then the right one follows. Our hips love rotational movement, so the more we can get, the better. Take that yoga block, place it underneath your left hip. Again, our focus is this front leg. We're keeping this left leg bent at 90 degrees or greater. I like to keep my toes pulled up towards my knees. This helps keep my knees really, really safe. This left knee should be down on the ground. I'm keeping the knee in line with my midline of my body. I'm going to get up really, really nice and tall. And I'm going to think about reaching my nose forward so my back stays flat. I'm reaching my glutes backwards so I can gain access to deepen the hip joint. And then when I feel that stopping point, when I start feeling a stretch, I'm just going to pause there. And then we're going to do 3 rounds of like what we just did in the last side. They're called pails. So we're pushing, we're making the muscle work, but we're not actually moving our body, but it helps us gain access to a greater range of motion. So you're going to push your left ankle down into the floor for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop pushing and see if you can get a little bit lower, just a little bit, like we're closing a pair of scissors. Our upper body, one blade of the scissor, our leg bone is the other blade, and the fulcrum of movement is the hip. Then we're going to push your left ankle down into the floor again for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop pushing. See if we can get a little bit lower. Now, one side might feel a lot different than the other, and that is completely normal. We don't ever want to go into any areas of pain or pinching. And I found that going a little bit gentler with stretches goes a little bit better. Push your left ankle down into the floor again for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop pushing down. See if you can get a little tiny bit lower. Remember, each time we do this pushing our foot into the ground, the amount of change is only going to be 5, maybe 10 degrees. It's small, but the more we practice over time, this is how we improve our range of motion. We're going to pause just for another couple breaths in this new position now that we've gained access to a greater range of motion. We're going to come up from there, get rid of that yoga block. We need to do a 90-90 transfer back to the first side so we stay nice and even. Picking up only that right knee. We're going to go through that bear sit, push your right knee down, and the left one follows. All right, so now we're going to do something called a tailor's pose, otherwise known as butterfly stretch. It is one of my favorites. So I like to grab a yoga block, and you're going to come against a wall. I'm going to sit right here so you can see me a little bit better. So we want to sit against a wall, something that isn't moving. I take this yoga block and I'm placing it right behind my lower back. This is going to help me stay up nice and straight. From there, bring your feet together, hold them as close to your groin as possible. And then you're going to place your hands on your knees. Very gently, as long as there's no pinching or pain, you can slowly press your knees down towards the ground. And then once you're at your maximum range, now you're going to push your knees up into your hands and you'll feel your inner groin working. So you're going to pull those knees up into your hand for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I like to hold my ankles. Now I'm going to use my glutes. I'm going to pull my knees down towards the ground. So I'm using my muscles of the glutes to stretch my inner groin, to stretch a little bit more hip external rotation. And then pause there. So I'm going to place my hands on top of my knees again. I'm going to use my inner groin muscles, push my knees up into my hands, make those muscles work for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I like to grab my ankles and I'm going to pull my knees down towards the ground as hard as I can, feeling it all kind of in the muscle, like right between my leg and my glute. Keep pulling it down for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll do one more. Hands on top of the knees. Push your knees up into your hand for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and pull those knees down towards the ground. Use your muscles to stretch your hips and to stretch your inner thighs for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to come to a standing position. Now this is where we need access to an elevated surface. I'm just going to use this ottoman here. So if you have access to an ottoman, if you have a step stool, ideally you want it about knee height or slightly lower. From there, what you're going to do, you're going to stand alongside your elevated surface. The leg that's closest to it, you'll put your foot on it. Now, I'm keeping my hips in line with the leg that's on the ground. The leg that's elevated is out to the side at about a 45-degree angle. It follows the natural flexibility of my hip. Place your hands on your hip bones. And now we are hinging forward and we are working to open up really deep in the groin and our adductors, so our inner thighs. So we're keeping our back flat, thinking about reaching your chest forward, pulling yourself down, and the stopping point will often be either deep in the groin of the leg that's on your elevated surface or your inner thighs. If you want a tiny bit more, you can assist yourself down just a little bit. Again, always be really gentle with your stretches. We're not forcing anything. And then we're going to come up. So we're going to do 5 repetitions here where I'm trying to rotate my pelvis over the head of the femur. So this is a different way of getting our hips unstuck. The very first movement where we were on the ground and we're doing the 90-90 transfers, we're moving our legs around a body that's not moving. Now we're moving our body around legs that aren't moving. We're only trying to get movement at the hip joint. As always, we never want to stretch into any areas of pinching or pain. We're not being overzealous about our stretching. What I found is if we get a little bit too overzealous, our body's going to tighten up and it will be harder to gain access to a greater range of motions. So we're finding that happy medium. So let's do it on the other side. I'm just going to shift views a little bit so you can see from a different perspective. So I'm keeping my pelvis in line with the leg that's on the ground. The leg that's elevated is out to the side at about a 30 to 45 degrees. And I'm keeping my back flat as I'm hinging forward. I'm feeling my pelvis rotate over the femur of the elevated leg. Just as much as I can go till I start feeling my body's like, that's it. That's as far as we're going to go. Always respecting our body's limits of flexibility. I'm going to do 5 here. This is one of my favorite movements right now for getting hips unstuck. And you may feel like one side is stickier than the other. And that is normal. The more we practice, the more unstuck they'll become. We're going to do that one more time. So we're going to do these 2 exercises, our tailor's pose or our butterfly stretch, as well as our standing hip opener. So I'm going to, this time, if you are comfortable with the movement, I'm going to grab a couple light weights. If you are new, I would suggest to stay with body weight. That's no problem. So I have my yoga blocks behind the sofa, so it's going to help keep me stable. I'm pulling my heels as close to my groin as possible, and I'm very, very gently going to place weights on the muscle, so I'm not placing it on the bone. Sitting up tall, and the very first thing, if you are holding weights, you're just letting the weights assist you into the stretch. Holding that just for a couple breaths. And then we're going to push our knees up, either into the weights or your hands, whatever you're using. And now, again, we're going to use our muscles to pull our knees back down to the ground. So pulling it down for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then pushing your knees up into either your hands or the weights for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pulling them back down. And then we have one more. Pushing it up again for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pulling it back down. It's a great stretch to open up the hips. We can set those weights down. We have our standing hip opener one more time. So coming alongside our elevated surface, placing one foot on that elevated surface. My leg is out towards the side, 45-degree angle. My hips are parallel to the foot that's on the ground. And then we're doing 5 standing hip openers. So we're rotating our pelvis over the head of the femur. And you'll notice the second time, it'll start to feel smoother. One of the biggest lessons that I have learned when we're trying to improve our flexibility and mobility, treating it very much like our strength training where we're doing multiple sets, because each set will feel a little bit better and a little bit easier. I particularly love this one. And we'll do one more. So how did that feel the second time around? A little bit better, right? Let's do the other side. It's a little switch so you can see what I'm doing. Showing you from a front view. So foot is in line with the hip is in line with the foot on the ground. Little elevated foot is out to the side, 45-degree angle. And then I'm just rotating my pelvis over the head of the femur till I feel that stopping point. And then I'm going to rotate back, just like you're trying to open up a rusty hinge. 3. I like to pause there just for a moment. 2 more. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking about reaching my tailbone up towards the ceiling, keeping my back as flat as I can. Should not feel this in your lower back. Last movement. So we have worked on opening up our hips, our inner thighs. We always need to finish off with a movement that really just solidifies everything. So what we're going to do is a deep squat. Now you have a couple options here. If your squat is limited, I would suggest holding on to something for balance. If you are a little bit more comfortable with your squat, you can hold a light to medium weight in a goblet hold. My feet are going to be about hip distance, shoulder distance, maybe slightly wider. I can turn my toes out slightly. Going to keep our core engaged, pulling my rib cage down, and we're going to lower into the deepest squat you can without any pain. So we're just going to solidify this by sitting in a deep squat. This is an amazing exercise for improving hip mobility because it is working on lengthening our inner thighs. We're just going to breathe through this movement. I want to think about getting your chest up tall. We're not rounding our back. We're just kind of sinking into the back of our hips. So sit up nice and tall. And we're going to hold here for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Brace your core. Stand all the way back up. We have 2 more. Thinking about pulling yourself down into that deep squat. If you're finding that you need a wider stance to sit in your deep squat, you can do that as well, wherever is comfortable for you. As your hip mobility improves, you'll be able to take a narrower stance. We just want to make sure that our heels stay on the ground, Chest stays up. I do like to hold on to a weight. I feel like it helps keep you counterbalanced, particularly if you feel like when you're in a deep squat, you fall backwards. This weight actually will just help you stay nice and balanced. Take a big breath, brace your core, stand all the way up. Let's go one more. But also, like I mentioned just a couple seconds ago, you can also hold on to something for support, the back of a sofa, something sturdy. Just make sure that it is very secure and that it can support you and your body. I'm just going to hold this position. This is called an isometric hold. Sometimes we don't think about when we're just holding a movement, we just think we're not doing anything. We're strengthening muscles, but they're not moving. It's called an isometric hold. So gaining strength just to hold a deep squat will help hip mobility immensely. Okay, getting ready. Breath in, brace your core, and standing up. All right, see how your hips feel? Let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next week.